Hi, welcome. This is Laura from Healing with Spirit with the next episode of Triggers in Spiritual Medicine. These episodes really work on addressing root issues. We talk about the elephant in the room to the growing sickness in our societies, not just in the United States, but globally. We address root issues, provide sustainable solutions, and we hope by addressing the intersectionality and connecting the dots like the web of many of society's challenges, we help to understand the trauma infection that impacts all areas of our life, such as addiction, domestic violence, racism, homelessness, to chronic health issues, environmental issues, climate change, and more. We hope by sharing these perspectives, we are sharing solutions, healing, and resolutions that are meant for, a long, basically from a sustainability approach. And in each episode, we address a certain trigger or triggers while offering the spiritual medicine with at least 3 actionable tips or steps that our listeners can take and implement today, basically today. Before we introduce, I just want to remind our listeners, please follow, please engage, please share, especially this episode, because you're going to want to tune in. This, I got to say, Frank Arjava Petter, who is been a light in my own journey. He is very well known in the Reiki communities, especially. He is I want to let him introduce himself, but he comes with a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge from a very grounded and rooted way. And even during the pandemic, he published 5 books. Not all of Reiki, he's mostly known for his Reiki writing, but he's an amazing writer. And he's going to share his journey, where he came from, what triggers, how did he get to where he is today. And welcome, Arjava. Would you like to please start off, just tell us just a little bit about who you are, because I prefer them to hear it from you, where you come from, how to, your background, let's start there.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Thank you for the kind introduction. As you can probably tell by now, I'm born in Germany. So I'm not a native English speaker. I hope you understand my German English. I grew up in Germany. I was born 1960 and very quickly got fed up with living there. And all I could think of was getting away from Germany as far as possible. And when I was about 15, 16, I stumbled across some books on Zen Buddhism, and that became kind of my secret plan to run away to Japan and enter a monastery and never be seen and heard of again. That was my idea. I failed miserably. My life turned out to be completely different. A couple of years later, so when I was 18, I tried to save my brother who was in India with Osho, the famous or infamous Indian spiritual teacher. I went there because my brother went there and the family got together. We thought that he had gone crazy and I would have to save him. But instead of saving him, I saved myself. So all the plans I had made for my future turned out completely differently. So I didn't end up in Japan. I ended up in India for a few years, learning to meditate and learning to reflect and to look inside and ask myself, who am I? And this was the absolute turning point in my life. This question, who am I, asking myself, who am I, who am I, who am I? And I've been doing that ever since. And luckily, I haven't come to any conclusion, because all the conclusions you could possibly get about who you are going to be false, are going to be just reflecting your cultural conditioning, your religious conditioning, your everything, your religion. Yeah. So this question can never be answered. And any answer that you could possibly come up with is going to be totally wrong. So
So if you were running away from Germany, what was, because especially like the podcast, like trigger. So do you remember like a particular incident or a series of incidents that kind of triggered you to say, I just want the heck out of here? Like we all kind of have them, right? So was there something that kind of just like lit the fire and said, I want it out of here?
so listen, when we talk about trauma or being traumatized, we
Mhm.
often think that, okay, this poor bastard over there, he got traumatized because he got run over by a truck, or he got beaten by his father or something, or a girl got traumatized by being raped or something
Mhm.
very graphic and terrible like that. But let me tell you that we're all traumatized, all of us. There is nobody who isn't. And those traumas that may have had a great impact on us, they might have been very small things, very tiny little incidents that now we might even laugh about, but they did change our personal history completely.
Mhm.
And if we were lucky, they changed them in a good way. Yeah,
Right.
so one of the things that was difficult in the 70s in Germany, there was a lot of police presence, and I lived in kind of a good neighborhood, good middle class neighborhood, and some local politicians used to live around the corner from my parents' house, and the police used to stand us up against our garage with the guns to our heads, searching us and thinking that we were terrorists, but we were just hippie kids, long hair and
Mm.
smoking pot and doing all sorts of nonsense. But we were not dangerous at all. Yeah? This was one of the things that really hurt, to stand against your own house,
Mm.
being searched and being. They didn't hurt us, but it hurt inside, and I just didn't like it. And then the whole focus of society was materialistic, was on higher, faster, better, greater. And I was so sick of it already as a child. I couldn't stand it. I just wanted to get away. So that was my trauma. It wasn't bad at all. Nothing happened to me. I didn't
Yeah.
get hurt.
But I think that like you said with trauma, right? Like they've done studies, right? Like even with like Holocaust survivors, right? Why did some come from survivors from the Holocaust that, like committed suicide and things like that? And then there were others that were so resilient that just like on the surface, you would think like nothing, like they were unscathed, right? And what they're learning now with the research is like there's like this difference. It's fascinating with human resilience and even how it affects us, right? Which is a topic for another day. But I just kind of wanted to say that, like, you could have, I don't want those who are listening like to compare your trauma story to another, like mine's worse than yours or whatever, because there is this resilience, and it's sometimes there's something just innate on how we respond to it, right? Like in a cellular level, right? And it
Yeah.
triggers us to do things. That's why I said the trigger. Like, what was the trigger? Because listen, this is always like something that, whether it's a trigger or a call to action saying I'm done, and we do this, right? And we shift and we move and we do something different, right? So, I wanted to kind of get an idea, like what was that like, right? And you discovered this thing with Buddhism, right? Which then, if I'm not mistaken, then you went to Osho and then you discovered Reiki, correct?
Yeah, well, that took a few years in between. So first I came across Osho, who was an incredible personality.
Mhm.
And I stayed with him for many years until he died. And while I was there at the ashram in India, I stumbled across Reiki. And my first experience with Reiki was not positive at all. I had a headache. I remember it very well, like a terrible headache. And a friend of my partner at the time was practicing Reiki. She gave me a treatment, and I found it the most boring experience I've ever had until then. It didn't it didn't work, or I thought it didn't work. It didn't have
Right.
the result that I had desired. The headache stayed. I went to a pharmacy, got some Tylenol or something, and I was okay. And I thought, poor Reiki is just a new age hocus pocus, and I'm not interested in that. And then I found myself looking for a teacher and thinking to myself, what are you doing? You didn't enjoy that. It didn't do what you thought it could do for you. It didn't work.
Mm.
It felt like a crazy thing. And why do you want to learn that? For what? I realized that many years later that in a Reiki treatment, in a Reiki workshop, your soul is tickled. And when that is tickled, it starts to smile, and you just can't forget that smile, when your soul.
I think I wrote your quote in this book because that has always stuck with me. That always stuck with me when
Yeah,
you
so
taught me that.
yeah, for me that was really a key experience that changed my life, and
Mm.
I understand why until many years later. So that's how I got interested in Reiki. Took a few more years, another 4 years, until I found somebody suitable to teach me. And that is now 30 years ago, and I've been practicing and enjoying it ever since. But it was really not planned. As I said earlier, all the plans I had made for my life, for myself, failed miserably. So meanwhile, I learned my lesson. I think I stopped doing it. I stopped planning things.
So do you think it was like the constant, because of your early exposure to like Zen Buddhism and the teachings with Osho, with this constant inquiry within, do you feel like that's kind of what always innately like was like the driving train, behind everything that you did?
Probably, but also I grew up. My parents were into homeopathy, and I grew up like that, going to the homeopathic doctors instead of going to the normal doctor. We also went to the hospital, but we always took these little globally little sugar pills. So I grew up with the clear understanding that healing is a human skill, an innate skill that maybe one day I would learn it. I still remember when I was about 16, I thought how nice it would be if you could help somebody feel well by touching them. I still remember that. So
Mm.
I kind of grew up with that. I didn't work on it. I didn't acquire it or so. It kind of came with my baby food, I think.
Mm. So like fast forward, like you learned Reiki, you even became part and studying with Kyoko Yamaguchi, right? Um, and you even lived in Japan for a number of years, now living in Greece, for those who don't kind of know a lot of your backstory too. And because you traveled all over the world, even teaching Reiki, right? That's kind of how I met you. And anybody who I've ever introduced, for those who are new, I don't know if you can feel through the screen or feel through the microphone, but we call this like the ability to hold a container, right? And there's something I've always said to my students. I go, I can't describe Arjava. You just got to be in his presence because he just has this ability to hold a level of presence and a container that no words can really describe. And then the pandemic happened where you weren't able to travel, right? Which led you to write 5 additional books. Can you maybe explain, because the pandemic was immensely triggering, right? Which kind of is what birthed this podcast, because people were triggered out the rear like we've never seen before, right? Over everything because of losses of freedom, losses of a lot of things, right? That people were feeling that were taken. But you were able to write, not being able to travel, which affected you, your ability to, with business and everything. But you wrote 5 books. Could you share like how you turned maybe what triggered for you into writing? Because what I got, if I'm not mistaken, writing was also therapeutic for you.
Okay, Laura, I'm a storyteller. With me, everything's got a story.
Which we love.
1.5. Huh? So I always liked writing as a child, and when I was in India, I was writing to my parents twice a month, writing in letters. And my mom always said to me, your letters are so nice. You really know how to write. I have a great grandfather who was a famous writer in Germany in a completely different field. He was a forester, writing about the environment, how to take care of the forest and things like that. And I always had this fantasy of becoming a writer, but it was so far away, so far and impossible. And then when I was 28, 29, I think, I met an old friend who was one of my mentors. He was an artist, a painter, and also an astrologer. And he said, hey, give me your date of birth and the place of birth. I just want to see what your psychological makeup is. And he said to me, hey, do you paint? And I said, I can't even paint a cat or a dog or a house. Everybody laughs when they see my paintings. When I do my groups and I draw something on the board, I try to draw something, people always laugh, because it's like a 3-year-old drawing. I said, no, I can't, really, I can't. He said, do you write? I said, well, I used to write. When I was a teenager, I wrote short stories and poetry. And he looked at me sternly and he said, continue, you'll make your money with it. You will make your living from it. And I thought, that's not possible. How would that be possible? He said, you start. So I went to Japan the year after, and I started to write Japanese type poetry, haikus, like three lines. And it was fun. I even published a few of them in a Japanese newspaper. That people loved them, and they found it exotic that a German was writing Japanese type poetry, which were then translated into Japanese. And then I saw my friend again a year later, and he said, very nice, but that's not it. Continue. And then I started to write a curriculum for the school I owned. We had a school with my former wife in Japan, a language school. So I wrote a curriculum for teaching English as a second language, German as a second language. And I went back again to my friend a year later. I said, look what I did here, a few hundred pages of curriculum. He said, very good. That's not it, continue. So he was always encouraging me to open my horizon. And then suddenly one of my Reiki students asked me, hey, do you know of any good books about Reiki? My friend who's a publisher in Japan would like to publish one. And I said, well, at the moment, I don't really know any books that I really liked, but maybe I'll write it. And then I started writing it, and that worked. So I've been doing that for many, many years. Published the first book in 1997. And since then, I've been writing more and more and more and more and more and more. And in 98, I think I started traveling a lot. And I found myself sitting on planes a lot of the time. What you do on a plane? Sitting there, you watch one movie, two, maybe three, no. And you can't read the whole flight. And I can't sleep on planes. And I often had to go on long intercontinental flights, like 10, 12, 14 hours sometimes. So I thought, why don't I condition myself into writing when I'm up there? There's no phone, no disturbance. Perfect, I can wear headphones. Perfect time to write. So I decided that I'll write texts that I can finish on each particular trip. And it took only a few weeks of doing that. And then, like you remember the story of Pavlov's dog, whenever he was ringing the bell, the saliva was running. Yeah? So same thing, the moment that fasten your seatbelt sign went off, I took out my laptop and started to hammer away on the keyboard. I've been doing that for 20 odd years. So there was a lot of material that I had in my computer when the pandemic hit. And I suddenly found myself out of work, not being able to travel, not being able to run groups. I thought, what am I going to do now so I don't lose my self-confidence? And what do I do so I don't sit around at home and bore myself to sleep? So I decided that I'm going to go through all the stuff that I had written in the past. I was sitting in my computer sleeping, snoring peacefully, to wake up those texts and to find a thread that weaves through it. And that's what I did. And I've been doing that for 3 years, looking at basically the things that I already had and then adding new text to weave them together. Yeah? So I came up with these last 5 books. 2 more are ready to go.
Wow.
3 more are kind of ready to go.
Wow.
Yes.
I'll tell you, out of all and I haven't caught up because I'm a very slow reader. So, but I will tell you, the minute I started reading your book can you just share like your processing behind that and a little bit about that book for folks? Because right now, that's my favorite book until I get to the other ones that you've written that I haven't read yet.
Well, the story behind that book was that people often ask me how you get into a good inner state. How do you do it? When we see you, you seem to be chilled and cool and quiet and peaceful and loving. And how do you do it?
But humorous too. You don't lose your humor.
Oh, it's one of the most important things, to laugh. So then I thought, okay, since people always ask me about that, why don't I write about it? And one of my tricks that I've learned in writing books is that when I start with the realization that it's done. Before I've written a single word, I know that inside it's done. It's finished. It's just like a sculpture. If he looks at a piece of marble or something. The statue that he's going to do is already in there. You just have to remove the excess garbage. Just have to chip away the stuff that you don't want. And with the book project, for me, it's the same. I don't think about it at all. I just consider it done. It's done. And then you relax. Then you relax, and then you can write it. And I never think about it. Of course, in the beginning, I do create some kind of a skeleton. So I thought about all the techniques that helped me in my life come to terms with myself, and build that whole book around that.
What has been some of the feedback you have gotten with some of your most recent books that either felt like, I always look at feedback and you go, oh, like, because you have your own perspective, right? And then when you get feedback from folks and you go, wow, like either you didn't see it through their lens or like from very profound perspective, right? Like what are some of the feedback that you go, wow, that maybe you've gotten from some of your most recent books?
You know what? I avoid looking at it. I learned that quickly. I don't read book reviews.
But even people in passing, saying things or giving feedback in that sense,
The personal feedback I do, of course,
Yeah.
I do listen to. And the last one I remember, somebody wrote about Love Speaks, one of my poetry adventures, and they really liked it and it touched their heart. So this kind of thing I like. But once a book is written and published, I'm done with it. I don't really want to know anymore about it. I'm too excited about the next one. So I don't really look at it.
So can you give those that might be listening that either may not be familiar with some of the writing that you've recently produced, can you share a little bit about, like we just talked about, can you share a little bit about what some of the other books that you have written and what they're about and what you're hoping that the reader will get from those books?
So in the beginning, I wrote the books on Reiki history and practice, and I don't know how many there are. I think there might be like 9 or 10 of them, and it's easy. They're easy to find. Just Google my name and they'll come up somewhere. Mostly about history and practice. I'm going to do 2 more, and then hopefully I will have exhausted. I would have exhausted that subject, and then the book is about being present and finding happiness and contentment with what is, which is really my life work. Not teaching it to other people, but doing it myself.
But you do in the book. I gotta say, I mean, the timing of that book and the pandemic, I mean, talk about having like a trigger that a lot of people, and how to stay present and getting into yourself. I mean, it was so beautiful. I mean, the timing of coming out with that book was a beautiful medicine, that people can use when they're especially when they're struggling, right?
Yeah, that was the purpose, because I found myself here. We live in a small village of about 1,000 people by the sea. And one of the things I noticed very quickly was that everybody, not only here, but worldwide, everybody was afraid for their health, afraid for their business. There was fear, and the media was fueling the fear, throwing gasoline on the fear that people had. And I started to pick up the collective fear all around me, and I'm thinking, oh my God, where are we going with this? This is horrible. We got to do something. We got to remind people to take one step back and look at themselves and to breathe and take it easy and not give into this mass hysteria. That was
Absolutely.
that was my reason for writing that, and I thought the timing was good. Now that you can self-publish books, I could manage it too on time. If I had gone through a publishing company, it would have taken a year and a half or something. And
Yeah.
like this, I just put it out within, I don't know, 3 months or something.
That's amazing. And then the next book after that?
The next book afterwards was a book called Love Speaks. It's all about love. Nice, very nice. And,
Well, can you define, because I'll say to my clients, we have this perception, right, of what love looks like. So would you be willing to define what love is?
love can be so many people. Yeah, and when you read the book, my poems, you might think, oh, he's talking about his wife, but not always. Yeah, I might be talking about my wife. I might be talking about the moon. I might be talking about a friend. I might be talking about the sea. I might be talking about, so it's all, love is everywhere. It's the single one force that governs everything. That's my experience. You find it everywhere. If your heart is open, you find it everywhere, looking at you, smiling at you, blowing kisses at you. But
See, even as you speak, you're speaking poetic. So it's
yeah, but wait, okay, now comes the next book. The
okay.
next book of poems is called Promise Me Never to Get Hurt. If possible.
And
So it's
and then what's that one about?
a provocative title, but what I meant, it's all about pain. Pain that you have with yourself, with society, with friends, with superiors, with society, then sickness, death, trauma, all of that. The whole book is about that, and it's a plea to keep your innocence, even though you get hurt. And this is the key.
Beautiful.
So don't get traumatized, but it doesn't sound good if I say promise me not to get traumatized. It sounds very heady, yeah. So I chose a different title that is a little bit misleading but provocative, because we all know you can't.
Right.
You cannot, but you can not get traumatized by terrible things.
Well, it's not allowing yourself to go down the rabbit hole. It's like what we talk about even with Reiki, right? It's like you can be angry, it can show up, but it's what you do with the anger, right? When it shows up, right?
Exactly. That's it. Huh? Then the next book, which one was the next after that? Oh yeah, the next one was my memories of the times I spent with Osho, and that just came out. And that's a really part of my autobiography. Also has a story behind it. About 8-9 years ago, I think I had pneumonia, and some of my friends were worried that I might kick the bucket. So they said, hey, before you die, please write down all the things that happened in your Reiki research that you haven't written about, and maybe some political things and things about other famous Reiki people. And I did, because I had about 3 weeks I had to stay in bed. I did, and then when I was done with that, I thought, people always ask me, how was that when you went to India with Osho? How was it to meet him? and live and work there. And I thought, well, I still have a few weeks left, so I can just write that. So I wrote that, and in the end, I did my whole life. So that's kind of an autobiographical something. And then I've got, as I said earlier, 3 more books kind of ready and 2 more Reiki books ready.
So let me just kind of recap just a little bit for folks who may not know you very well. Arjava, Frank Arjava Petter is probably one of the probably if not the leading Reiki historian. He is the vice representative of the Jikiden Reiki Institute in Kyoto, Japan. He has published 15 plus books on various topics, from Reiki to spiritual type topics, poetry, and has a beautiful center on Lesbos, Greece, and is probably one of the most thought-provoking, amazing spiritual teachers that we have in modern day society. That with that, what would you say? What would be like? I mean, especially like in the States, we have like all this upheaval. We see it like with what's happening in Iran, right? In other countries, there's a lot of upheaval. What would you say would be the number one thing, or what are some of the top 3 things that somebody could do today to either lessen the pain or to transform it so they can kind of reclaim that power?
Number 1 is breathing.
Seems simple, right?
It seems very simple. And if you look at a small child, you would see that little belly going up and down, up and down. So when we are small, when we are like preschool age, we know how to breathe properly. We breathe deep down into our lower abdomen, and we're doing fine when we do this. But then when we grow up, the breath starts to get more and more shallow. We breathe higher up into the chest, and when we do that, we don't oxygenize our system enough. One of the things that many people, everybody will know that the heart pumps the blood through our system, right? But not many people know what the breathing does. The breathing regulates the lymphatic flow in the body. And if you don't breathe properly, you don't get enough nutrients and you don't detox enough. So if you breathe properly, you become more healthy, even physiologically more healthy. But I'm more concerned with the psycho-emotional. So if you breathe well, you'll have a good life. This is number 1. So you breathe down into your lower abdomen, and if you try to force the breath down, it's going to be difficult because you're not used to it. So don't try that. Instead of that, just as you breathe in, push your belly out. Then it goes by itself. And that way you have much more volume, a much deeper breath, and more oxygen everywhere. So you can be awake, aware, and happy. And dull and in a kind of a stupor.
Beautiful way of explaining the breathing, right? And it again, it seems simple, but it's something we take for granted, right? And
I think our societies are really caveman societies. How come we don't teach the kids in school how to breathe properly? I don't understand it. It's the most basic thing. And I can tell you from my experience that if you breathe properly, you feel good. It's so simple. It's so ridiculously simple. It's like it's crazy. It's so simple.
Oh gosh, right. So what would be? Go ahead.
Not deep wisdom that is necessary. Just breathe properly, finish.
Mm.
So this is number one. The second step, meditation.
Oh,
If
but
you,
I can't meditate. I've tried that. I'm a bad meditator.
yeah, and you know why it doesn't work, because because you can't just start there. Meditation is like on the fourth floor of your building, and you can't start there. You need to create the basement first. And the basement means you have to feel comfortable in your own physical body. So my suggestion is that, first of all, take a few minutes every day, maybe when you're going to sleep or just after you wake up, and you go inside and you feel your right hand, you feel your right arm, you feel your left hand and your left arm, you feel your right leg and your left leg. Then you go through your lower abdomen, you go and feel all your organs from the inside. Then feel the back, the pelvis, the kidneys, the lungs, the heart, the chest, and then finally the head. Feel it all from the inside, and just look into your body from the inside and be glad that you had this thing. It's a blessing to have, we take it for granted. Nothing is granted. There are many people who can't move, who have disabilities, who cannot lift their arms or something. We do it all the time. We don't appreciate it. So feel the body from the inside and celebrate that you have this body, that it's given to you and everything is working. Nice, very nice. And then look inside if there's any tension anywhere. And if you find tension, let's say, in your shoulder, just ask your body, hey, what are you trying to tell me? Do you have a voice?
I usually say, what's that? Oh, there was that cartoon with the cells and like the red blood cells. I said, yeah, I just picture like, this part of the body has got like little eyes and a little mouth and it speaks to you, right? And it's funny. Here's where the science is catching up with this. I just got to bridge with this because they now have a term for it. It's called somatic experiencing, right? Because they're recognizing that the physical body actually holds all this stuff, but this is why, like in healthcare, why it's disconnected, because they're just now catching up with where certain spiritual practices have understood this for thousands of years, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. We all know what we say, we have a gut feeling. What is that? Yeah, your gut is trying to tell you something. And you listen. You better listen. And when your shoulder hurts, your shoulder is trying to tell you something. You better listen. It doesn't need to be like a psychological drama that's attached to that at all. Maybe the back is hurting and you say, hey, tell me, what's going on? And the back says, hey, listen, you're sitting in front of a computer too many hours. Go out and stretch every couple of hours or something, or run around the block, or get on your bicycle and do one round. Something like that. I'm not talking about going into this psychodrama.
Yeah, it
Not
doesn't have to be that way. It could be as simple as like what you just said, right?
just simple. So start to feel comfortable and at home in your own body. There are many ways to do it. Another good way to do is to give yourself some treats, get a Reiki treatment from Laura, or get a massage or something like that, or do sports. So this is the first thing. Then the second thing is you have to be comfortable in your psycho-emotional self. And the way that I do it, the way I learned to do it, is to imagine that you create like an aura of love around you. And you could start, that is very simple to do. You could start it from your heart. You feel love in your heart, and you just let that spread throughout your whole body, and then let that go beyond it. And like an aura, a halo of love around you. Yeah? And then you take it from there. So those are the first three steps: breathing, feeling at home in your body, filling yourself up with love, and then you can get into sitting silently. Before that, I think you're going to fail.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I'm working with clients sometimes, I hear one of the stories I wrote in the book was having somebody that came and said, they dropped the F-bomb, they go, I hate this so-and-so, right? And you could just feel it coming out of their body, right? And I said, let's just change one word. Let's just change, the word hate. And we went to the somatics, like, so tell me like how that's feeling. And they go, oh, my anxiety is through the roof, right? And oh, and this is how, and I go, okay, let's just choose one word. And I forget the actual word that they chose, but it was more of a neutral word, right? And it's okay, so what does that say? Like, and they go, and it really wasn't about like that it was hate, but hate was like the guillotine that came down because that was easy, because they didn't know how to express themselves, to say, I didn't know how to put a healthy boundary down with somebody who was trying to enforce their personal beliefs on me. So it was easy for me to say hate instead of saying I need to be able to know how to put a healthy boundary. And when they changed the word, that one word, within 60 seconds, their anxiety went from a 9 to a 2. And, it can be something. And then what I always say is, you're going to have more experiences like that, but now you have the tools because you just proved to yourself that you can shift it in 60 seconds because you just did it.
Yeah, we have to realize that we are responsible for our own lives, for what's happening with us. And responsible, okay, now you have a German teaching you English, yeah? Where does it come from, the word? Yeah? It comes from being able to respond. Responsible doesn't mean it's your fault, doesn't mean you messed up, but you are able to respond to life in the appropriate way. And
I just loved how you just defined that.
That's really nice.
Can you repeat? I want you to repeat that again, because I feel like it needs to be like, that on that thing, like you just got to hear it again.
What did I say?
About being responsible and respond.
Yeah, so being responsible means not that it's something is your fault, but that you're able to respond to what's happening to you appropriately, in a nice way, in a nice and kind and loving way. That's it. Yeah? So something happens to you and you're able to respond in a proper way to it. That's responsible. And that's really cool. If you look at it like that, that's really cool. That's fun. Yeah, you change your life. You go, wow, and then you put yourself in the driver's seat and you're not a victim. As long as the responsibility is with others, I'm a victim. Can I say that here? The F word. Yeah?
Fuck that shit.
Yeah, I'm fucked. Yeah? And once you're fucked, how you unfuck yourself? It's impossible. Yeah? So put yourself in the driver's seat, be responsible, and change your life. That's great. And the more obstacles you have, the better, because every obstacle is another chance at transformation and change and learning something great. I look at the obstacles in my life like somebody looks at the landscape flying by when you're going somewhere by car. It's adventure. It's nice. Wow, look at that, a mountain. Ooh, a forest. Hey. Oh, water. Cool. Yeah, this. So it's just a way of switching your brain away from judging something as good or bad. You just say, oh, wow, look at that.
I'll never forget the day my dad met you. I just got to say this, because I think just being in your presence made him an instant believer. This is where, like, we talk about too, about the energy we bring through, right? We talk about this with Kododama, right? It's it's not just the words you say, it's the energy, right? It's the container. And you changed my dad's life. I'll just tell you that. Like, you really impacted him in the short time he met you. And it changed some of his conditioning and belief systems, because I would say to him all the time, and it would be like in ear one ear and out the other, right? And then it's like, would you like some more sake?
It's always easier to hear it from somebody else.
Yeah.
We know that if it's somebody not related, somebody different, you can listen to it. Sometimes hearing it from your own wife or your own husband or your own child or your own father is difficult.
Yeah.
We know that that's the whole secret there. But don't say these things too loud, because my daughter teases me with this all the time. She says, oh, Arjava, you have changed my life. Is making fun of me because she hears this sometimes. And really, it's not that I change somebody's life. People's life change because they change. They take initiative. And you, for some reason, at some point, your ears are this big, and you can hear things and you take the chance and change. It's not the person who's saying it to you, it's you. Yeah, you
So,
change.
on that note, how would somebody, if somebody wanted to work with you, if somebody wanted to study with you, or if they wanted to somehow further explore or purchase books, what's the best way to find you? How is the best way to reach you?
Yeah, the best way is to just come over
To where?
and ask where we live in Lesbos and ask anyone in the village where I am, they will tell you. That's the best way, and it would be my favorite way too. Otherwise, you can Google my name, go to Amazon or any other online bookstore to find the books, or you can look at my website, which is myname.com, frankarjavapeter.com, and you find my email address there. Send me an email or look me up on Facebook or something. It's easy. I'm not really that elusive. The only thing is that because I am into this creative stuff, I do disappear at times when I'm in the middle of a project, and then I'm really ruthless. I don't answer the phone. I don't check my emails. I just go into my project, but I do re-emerge again and then take care of
That's
what
not
I.
necessarily a bad thing, though, I gotta say. I think a lot more folks, especially in the Western world, need to unplug more. you
Yeah,
know?
this is one of the secrets I learned. I had a friend, an Indian disciple of Osho. He was 25, 30 years elder than me. And he was one of my mentors. And he said to me, listen, Arjava, don't make yourself too busy. That inner search, it needs time. You need time for yourself. So don't make yourself too busy. He was telling me that when I was getting well known in the Reiki world, and when I had the chance to concrete my schedule beyond belief, to go here and there, today Tokyo, today Taipei, tomorrow, and Shanghai day after tomorrow, and I didn't do it. I don't do it. I don't do it. I do, let's say, 2, maybe 3 weeks in a row of workshops, and then I take 3 or 4 weeks off. Yeah, I need it.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and thank you very much for joining. For those listening, don't forget to follow, like, share, comment, engage. Let us know your feedback about today's episode. Arjava said come and visit him in Lesbos. So, but his website is also www.frankarjava, which is ARJAVA, Petter, PETTER.com. And that will conclude today's episode of Triggers in Spiritual Medicine. Thank you.